Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. So a lot of volatility in the market right now. Good time to go looking at individual stocks and see whether we're seeing real breaks in the trends or whether those are if it's just noise. So we're going to get into that. Lots of stocks to talk about. But first, I did want to do a lesson on MACD signals. I've touched on a lot of different things, but I wanted to make sure I made it pretty crystal clear because I got a question from a guy that I think is a pretty bright guy, and he had some questions regarding some of the signals, especially around the zero line. So I want to touch on that. I think, MACD can be a big advantage at helping with reversal signals in trends. So if a stock is pulling back in a trend, I think the MACD can be very useful in that situation. So we've got a lot of different signals listed here. Zero line reversals, the zero line reversal and the reverse divergent combo. Zero line, and then the question of whether it's a zero line overrun, which is actually still pretty bullish, versus a zero line break. So I want to touch on that. And then a signal that I call a counter trend line, where price is going one way and MACD is going the other. And I will mention momentum divergence here. And then also when we get a MACD extreme. So these are all different things I want to touch. I want to do it pretty quick because we have a lot of symbols to go through. So before I do that, let me just touch on my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. If you go to the services page, I had a few questions on this. Yes, I'm still offering a discount to the service right now. If you plug in on the coupon code, if you plug in StockTalk, you'll get the first 2 months for $50. So I go through thousands of charts. I do provide commentary on the market and in the sectors, but really trying to generate individual stock ideas for people. So take a look at that. Okay, let's get going with the MACD lesson. There's a lot of lines on this chart. I'm going to try and simplify this a little bit, a number of different signals, but let's just start on the left-hand side. I want to show first this MACD extreme. So one thing you need to know is that MACD, while it's a momentum indicator, is a overbought, oversold oscillator as well. So you want to think about it that way, and you want to recognize where each individual stock has sort of an overbought region and an oversold region normally, right? Those are normalized overbought, normalized oversold. Now, there are times when the market gets to an extreme in either direction, or a stock could individually, but a lot of times it has to do with the market to the downside, where we get a big extreme reading. And I think you just have to recognize that because your thinking probably needs to change a little bit on these extremes. When you get an extreme move, if you're waiting for a move back up through this zero line or like a true reversal of trend based on MACD, it's going to make a pretty big move off the low before you actually get any kind of a buy signal. So I start to alter my thinking a little bit. One of the things I like to look for, certainly if you're at an extreme, you can go down to a lower time frame. You also want to make sure you're looking at price support on the higher time frame. So this might be breaking down on a daily chart and not show any signs of support. If you go look at a weekly or a monthly, you might be coming into some major support based on that. If that's the case, then we can start to go down a lower time frame and look for buy signals. Now, one of the signals I do like to look for is this I call it a counter trend lines essentially, and that's where we get an extreme move to the downside, some kind of a climax, and then a rally off the low. And the low tends to fail right around the 18. But instead of coming down and just breaking away to a new low or coming back down to test away, it straddles the 18 as it's pulling back. So it's staying connected to the 18 while the 18 is still pulling back. That type of pattern, when that happens, I'm going to go look at the MACD. And if the MACD lines are going in the opposite direction, in this case to the upside, I view that to be very bullish. So I'd go down and look at either draw a tight trend line, or I'd go down to a lower time frame and look for a buy signal. Be on the lookout for this counter trend play when the price is straddling the 18 after a climax. The other thing I wanted to mention is, so I've got these dotted lines going across. So, and that's essentially showing where key support levels are along the way. The thing that it doesn't show, and I wanted to do it this way, this is a daily chart, it goes back a couple years, but it doesn't show the weekly. And normally I like to have the weekly chart up, but if you look at where these pullbacks are taking place, this pullback here, this was another zero line reversal here, another one here, another one here, and then this was a break of the trend line. Every one of these were pullbacks to the 18, a rising 18 week. So each one of these pullbacks had a rising 18 week, and then you finally broke the 18 week, you broke the trend line, and you broke support. So once I see that, then I'm thinking this is a zero line break. Okay, so that's the difference between a zero line break and a zero line overrun. You won't have all of these factors taking into account. You might overrun the zero line. So if we have a zero line here and MACD comes down below, both the signal line both, and it might just spend a little bit of time underneath like this, that's a lot different than a clear break like what I'm showing here. And you want to recognize the difference between the two, because if you get this overrun pattern, you can be a little bit more aggressive on a change in trend. You can look for price to do a 1, 2, 3. If we get a clear break to the downside, then we're actually looking for a full-fledged shift back to the upside, and we want to see green DI confirm the move. So if I were to look at this trend line break here, that's a trend line break and then a pullback to the 18 and then a move back up through this peak here. That's a 1, 2, 3 change in trend in price, but look at how the green DI did not confirm that move. So I'm less inclined to be interested here. The other thing that I'm not mentioning is this dotted line, which was support, is now providing resistance. And by the way, that is now a declining 18 week providing resistance. So go look at the 18 week when we're done, and you'll see that that actually rallied up to the declining 18 week here and acted as resistance. And this was basically a zero line reversal to the downside, a little bit of overrun, but basically the same concept. So these are the types of patterns I want you to be on the lookout for. Now, let's just go back. I want you to show you this one pattern specifically, because these are all zero line reversals. So this is a zero line reversal, so is that, and this is as well. But this one had a higher bottom. We came down to support and then made a higher low, and the MACD made a lower low. So this is actually reverse divergence and a zero line reversal. So we have the zero line touch, but price is actually making a higher low. I consider this to be one of my favorite types of zero line reversals because it has reverse divergence as well. So we're getting a higher bottom in price and a lower low in MACD and a zero line reversal all at the same time. I like that. This did the same thing here. This was more of a sideways consolidation pattern while MACD was making a lower low. So my suggestion is to take a snapshot of this and make sure you kind of have these signals down. These can be really helpful for buying pullbacks, especially when we're coming down towards the zero line. You have to look at the ADX on all these signals. If we're getting massive red DI on any one of these pullbacks showing that and causing the ADX to really get going to the downside, then you can be a lot more patient. But if you notice a lot of these, like look at this drops. This is a pretty violent drop. Yes, we got red DI going, but notice how the ADX stayed very low. So in that case, I'm still very interested, and my bias is still to the upside. And so you want to keep looking for pullbacks to support these zero line reversals, especially when you have a rising ADX, a rising 18 week right underneath you. So these are the types of things we want to be on the lookout for. Lots of different signals. Hope this helps. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at some individual stocks and do some analysis. Okay, so first stock we got here is Tesla. And I'm going to, throughout this part of the show, I do want to continue to talk about MACD and make sure I'm just showing you in real time some of the things that have developed. So if you look at Tesla, it went through this ABC decline, and we can see based on the trend line. So if I drew a trend line here, we broke the downtrend here, and we had a zero line pullback, a zero line reversal setting up with low ADX. So and at the same time, we had a pinch developing on the monthly. So these are the types of combinations you want to be on the lookout for. And when I see a ABC decline like that, where we go up, we come down, go up, and then come back down, and at least test, maybe make a minor low, then I'm inclined to think I want to draw a trend line in place. If we break the trend line, then you can get in. There have been a few other signals as well. If you wanted to wait for this to cross over and then pinch on the MACD, we had that as well. And that's where the 18 actually was flat here. And then all of a sudden, notice how we rallied up and tested the 18 and held it there. So that was really pretty, I think, a pretty nice secondary entry based on the zero line reversal. Now we've made a move up. So I want you to look at this, see how this never got back to the 18-month line. So I think we run the risk of having this potentially come back down again like that, where we don't get through this on the first try. I mean, I like the overall pattern, don't get me wrong, but when we see this, go and look at a stock like Qualcomm on the monthly, where we consolidated and never got back to the 18-month, and now it's come back down to test that again. So that's the only question mark I see on this. I mean, overall, the trend looks pretty good, but we do have some resistance coming up around 800. I think 800 is the key on this. If we can get through 800, then it's very possible it's just going to keep going right now. THO. So this is pretty interesting because we've got another pullback to the rising 18-month line. And we have a second pinch where this is the first cross on the monthly chart. Let's just zero in on this a sec. So this was the first pullback. There's your first pinch. And now we're getting a second pinch where we're holding the signal line. That's on the monthly. And then if we go and look at the weekly chart, we had a zero line reversal on the first pinch. And now we've got a zero line reversal with overrun. So this is what I'm talking about with the overrun, where we are getting below, but it's not in a way that's sort of breaking the trend or breaking support or breaking the higher time frame 18. So you have to consider this still to be a pretty good signal, even though it isn't turning right at the zero line. So that's what I mean by zero line overrun. Now we're getting a trend line break. I'd be looking for this. I like this kind of pullback that's developing. I think as long as this holds 120, this is in really good shape. Pretty good overall pattern, really. So TTE, an energy stock, trying to turn around. And as I mentioned in the previous shows, this is where the 18-month turned down, and this is where it's turning back up. So we can see the slope of that line is helping us sort of define what's going on the bigger trend. I also like the fact that we got back above this big, what was resistance. We got back above that. Now it's providing support. So those are really positives. Now we're starting to get a turn right around the zero line. I think we want to watch for a pullback. I don't like to chase these. I'd like to see a little check back here. Now that we're back up to the prior high, get a little dip, a little kind of cup around pattern like this, a little higher pivot low, and I think that would be the entry I'd be watching for on that one. PGNY, so strong move to the upside. So we had two pullbacks and then made a new high, and then we had a really strong decline that broke both of the moving averages. And I'm sort of one to believe that this is going to need more time to consolidate. So once we get the first two pullbacks after a breakout, so you get your breakout and then you get a couple pullbacks, then you should be looking for a more complex corrective pattern. And sometimes it's just a sideways sort of channel that develops. And I think that's what's happening here. I just think it needs a little bit more time. I would still say the bias is to the upside. We got a strong rising 18-month underneath and a nice spike reversal on the monthly bar when it tried to dip under 50. So those are all positives. I just don't know that it's timely right now. Okay, Gallagher, Arthur Gallagher. So the last entry was really on this pullback. Look at these pullbacks to the 18-week. Every time we go to a new high, the MACD is confirming by hitting a new high. Those are really good signs. The ADX has been above 25 now and holding 25 on all pullbacks. Really strong. The weekly is the trend time frame in terms of where the tradable trend is. I believe that's on the weekly. The monthly's in an uptrend. We're just not getting opportunities near the 18-month, but the opportunities here are on the pullbacks. The problem right now is that we just had a buy signal and now we're kind of moving up. I mean, you could try and play this on the daily chart, but I don't know if this has the dynamics to keep pushing away from the 18-month like that. If you do that, you need to play it a little tight, or you could just play it with a little less capital. But it's not a bad looking pattern. I'm just wondering how much upside you're going to have playing it from here. Let's look at ABBV. So, the pullback, how it pulls back is relevant because what we've got the makings of a zero line reversal developing, right? I mean, we have low ADX. We've got some red showing up on the DI, but we're coming back down to the zero line. However, I mean, look at the difference. Look at the way this came in. That is a lot different than this type of a pullback, or look at how orderly that kind of a pullback was. I mean, look at these zero line reversals. Now, this was pretty violent, this pullback, but you have to look at what was going on the bigger picture, and that took place during this pullback, and that was actually a pinch play on the monthly. So that's why I like to look at multiple time frames. But the point I'm making here is this looks like more of like a break of the short-term trend. The 18-week has rolled over. I think this is going to take more time, and so I'm not in a big hurry here. Look at the zero line overrun. Actually, it's more like a break, right? I mean, it's not just an overrun, but more of a break, and I think it's going to take more time underneath here. And I think this zero line reversal pattern on the weekly is going to probably take a month or two to develop. The key level to watch now is in the low 100s. That was the breakout level in the 18-month. NVCR. So we had this pullback. Now, I mean, it's all about identifying the quality of the pullback. I mean, look at the violence of this sell-off. I mean, this is just too violent. Big red bars coming down. When I see that, I'm just not in a big hurry. Now, if I want to trade it, I'm noticing pretty substantial support. We got a big round number at 100 and huge support there. So if this comes down to that level, I might be down on a daily or an hourly, and I might want to trade back to, I think the new resistance level is probably right in here. And so you have a little bit of room, probably 15 or 20 points to try and trade. But in terms of looking for a new trending move where we're getting back in on a monthly trend that's starting to move back to the upside and you can hold it for a while, I don't think this is ready for that. I think there's too much damage in the pullback, and this is probably going to take, 3 or 4 months to go through and see if it can survive holding the 100 area. So if you want to trade it, be down on a daily or an hourly even, and look for some of the signs that I've been describing based on MACD and ADX. HIBB. So here's another one that, look at this 18 and 40 rising really nicely. You had MACD confirming, and then you went to this new high right here. So here's 100 right here. We made a higher high, and look at how badly the MACD did not confirm. So this is the momentum divergence I mentioned earlier. So we've actually had two levels. This was also divergent here. So we went to a higher high, and this actually just made a double top. This is even more bearish, where we didn't even get back above the signal line. We actually did a pinch underneath the signal line, which made a lower high in MACD, while this was making a higher high right at the 100 number. Be on the lookout for this. But here's the big red bar violating the 18-week. The 18-week is rolled over. Now we're looking for a full-fledged correction that allows the MACD to come all the way back down to the zero line, and we'll have to see how it handles that. I mean, I'm of the opinion now that this is going to work closer to the 18-month. Look at how the ADX was rising and is now declining. So I'm more of the opinion that this is going to have to catch up with the 18-month line sometime over the next few months. VRAY. So been trending. I mean, we can see this trend. We have a rising 18 and a rising 40, and we keep pulling back to those, and those lines keep rising, and we keep making higher highs and higher lows. So there's nothing wrong with it from that standpoint. My problem is that we're coming up into this, I think, bigger problem area. I mean, I can see the violence of the sell-off. That was pretty nasty in the way that sold off. So I think there's still some people up here that are probably, as we get closer to them, are going to be tougher to get through. So I'm not really all that interested in buying this now. I think there's just a little bit too much resistance there. Maybe if this works sideways, builds a little bit better base, and maybe create some energy for a breakout through 7.5, then that might be a little bit more interesting. But I don't think right now, again, unless I want to go down to the really micro timeframes and just trade, I wouldn't be looking at this from a bigger picture standpoint. Now this has the same kind of problem here. Do you see that? I mean, that was pretty violent in the way it reversed back to the downside. However, you've got this big red bar, and we're kind of working our way through the midpoint of that. So I'm actually kind of liking the way this is developing. Look at the ADX strength. MACD is back up through the 0 line. We're pulling back. It's kind of forming a little pinch on the monthly. The only issue you've got is I think this wants to spend a little bit more time letting the MACD work off the overbought condition. But this is one I'd be watching. I think sometime in the next month, 6 weeks, this could set up a lot of support at 12.5. Maybe even 13, something like that. So definitely a name to watch. We just need a little bit more time here to allow this to set up and maybe let the 18-month catch up a little bit. Okay, so I got a request on Facebook. Obviously, some pretty decent news around this stock over the course of the last week or two. And we've broken the daily trend. So we had rising moving averages all the way through here. Now they're both declining. But we've gotten a break of the 18-week, and it has flattened out, but we still have a rising 40. We don't really have what I would consider to be trend change on the weekly. We have it on the daily chart, but not on the weekly chart. And there's a significant amount of support down around 300. So I think this is just a correction right now. I think that's what this is headed for. I would not be planning on this falling apart or anything, and it might actually rally up, come back down, do that kind of thing where it makes a lower high and then a lower low, and then it could start to look a little bit better. But I do think this is going to take a few months before it's ready to be bought again. If I'm looking at this from a longer term standpoint, I think I'm still long this stock on a longer term picture, like big picture. But I wouldn't be interested in doing any new buying right now. SPR, so another one where the 18-month line turned down a few years back and now is turning up, okay? So we were in a downtrend on a longer-term pattern, and now we're starting to show a little bit of a reversal. Now notice this pullback, lower high, and MACD holding. So we've got a little pinch develop on the monthly. We've got a 0 line reversal developing on the weekly. So this is very interesting. We've made a little run on the daily chart. I want to watch for a pullback. Now that the ADX is above 25, look for your first pullback. It could be somewhere around 45. It might come all the way down to the 18, but it might not. It might just come back down to the support area around 45. That'd be what I'd be watching for sometime over the next week or two. So NCR, nice breakout. I want to look at this monthly chart. Let's zero in on this a little bit. So we had a really nice move to the upside, confirming momentum, both ADX and MACD. We took out this key level around 40, and now we're pulling back to it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bar pullback, and now we're trying to turn back up from this pinch. And so the monthly chart looks pretty decent. What's happening right now on the weekly is we don't have a low ADX yet. I mean, it hasn't gone through a long enough correction for me to want to buy the downtrend line break. And we are rallying up to the 18-week right now. So you see this 18-week right here is sort of declining. So we're rallied up to that. What I'd like to see is one of two things. I either want to see this fail here and come back, and then if it came back up through like that, then I would be more interested in buying that. The other thing that could happen is if it's strong, it breaks the 18, and then the 18 cups around underneath, and then you buy the first pullback. So those are the two ways I would be looking at this just based on the way it's developing. But don't get me wrong, I am definitely interested in buying this pullback. I do like the looks of it. So that's kind of how I would be playing this. Okay, Pioneer, PXD, strong move. So let's just look at this from this standpoint. On the monthly chart, we undercut this bottom and then made a higher bottom and came up through. Now we made our pullback and held a decent support area around 150. So we held that and are turning up. And notice what MACD is crossing back above the 0 line. We had a little pinch there. These pinches on the monthly chart are really nice supporting evidence for what you're trying to do on the weekly and the daily. So be on the lookout for these, especially when it's around the 0 line. So we get this little pullback and you start looking in the 150 area. Now we had the 0 line reversal. It was a little quick. The moving averages never came together. I think this would have been a little tough. I mean, you might have wanted to buy this breakout at 160, but frankly, I would be waiting now for your next pullback, maybe around 170. There's some pretty strong support, I think, in 170. If we can get a little dip here, I wouldn't chase it. I mean, I like the looks of this, but I would not chase this. I would wait for an opportunity on some type of a little consolidation or a pullback. ADX definitely improving on the daily chart. Got a request to go through a few of these cocoa and coffee and sugar, so I want to do that. Look at the monthly chart just working sideways on cocoa. It's actually hovering at the 0 line on the monthly chart. We got above 0 and it's just been hovering or working sideways. You can definitely see a really strong 2750 area being very, very critical. If we can work through that, I think that would be pretty powerful. ADX is starting to improve on the weekly chart, so I'd like to see some confirmation getting through that area, and if it does, then I got to believe that this is headed higher. Let's look at coffee, because look at the difference. I want to show this on the bigger picture. Look at this break of the downtrend. We work sideways, and now we're starting to lift off. Look at the ADX strength. Look at the MACD confirming. I mean, this is a really powerful trend. Now, we have gotten back up to this problem area from years ago. So this is a pretty good spot for this to take a breather. We've gotten stretched away from the 18-month line. It's a good spot for this to consolidate. But the power behind this move leads me to believe after a pullback that there's more upside coming. I think we have time for one more. Let's look at sugar. So sugar doing sort of the same thing. Look at this decline, and it tried to rally up, and then we came back down and tested this low. Look at that undercut here with divergence on the MACD. And then we made a really strong move, and then look at that pullback to the breakout area, and now we've had follow through. So we're starting to come into a little bit of a problem area, and I want to see this on the weekly chart. I would like to see this go through a little bit better consolidation. If I'm being a buyer, I mean, I'm looking for a little bit better consolidation pattern. Maybe even an ABC decline. If I'm interested in buying this, I mean, I want, that's what I'm looking for, some kind of a little bit better correction. But I think we have to have a lot of respect for what's going on here. The momentum, the ADX just crossed up above 25 on the monthly chart. And look at the power of the ADX on the weekly chart. So the fact that this keeps holding and we've got rising moving averages, I mean, this isn't really strong. We still have a little bit of room before we hit the bigger resistance area. Thanks for tuning in. That's all the time we have for today. Please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is listed. And also keep sending in those stock requests. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.